Thank you for joining Beyond the Workbench, a podcast where Odin Clack and Michael Magnus discuss life, business, and how to help entrepreneurs grow and innovate.
Man, it feels like it's been too long. This is a busy season, busy time of year. How have you been?
Doing well. That question comes on a good day because I actually feel great today. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on. I don't know. Maybe my wife gave me some words of encouragement or something. I don't know what it is, but I actually feel great. It's, we record these things a little later in the evening, but I feel like I'm ready to rock, man. I don't know if that's a sign of good things to come or is a sign of a crash to come, one or the other, but today I feel great. But the last few weeks, to your point, it's been really, really busy. It's been a whirlwind of activity. I mean, I've had travel, I've had family stuff, I've had some projects I've been working with my wife with. It's been a madhouse around here. It's not a complaint. It's an observation more than a complaint.
Right. So tell me what's going on with your background. It looks like you're in a totally different room right now, but I recognize the chair.
I'm in the same room I'm always in, right? The difference is the backdrop, the people you normally see behind me, the wooden panels. This is actually my trade show booth wall. When I moved in here, I hated the white wall. It seems so bland, right? And so I want to be more like YouTube-ish with like the office studios type setup. So I took the wall from my trade show setup and put it behind me, and it's been there for like 3.5, 4 years. Well, this past weekend, I actually finally got off my butt and I went and did another, marketplace, and took the wall out and took it down to downtown Dallas with me and used it. And I just haven't brought it back in the office yet, but it will return. There may be some changes. Now that I've actually moved it once since like 3 or 4 years, I'm thinking there may be a few changes, but I definitely don't like the white wall. For me, it looks fake almost, right? We'll fix it. Next episode, we'll have it resolved by then, I'm sure.
So tell me about the show. What kind of show did you guys do?
In Dallas, which is our market, Dallas-Fort Worth, the big show. And by show, maybe I should qualify what I mean by show. It's not really a trade show as it is. It's like a holiday marketplace. And I know a lot of crafters and brands go do these things, big brands, small brands, whatever. One of the bigger shows around here, at least it used to be, was one called, I think originally it was called Etsy Dallas. It's like a collection of all these Etsy sellers, which I've never been, but they allowed me to join in years past and set up shop for the day. They are now called Dallas M.A.D.E, I think. And so they do this show at Gilley's, which is like this traditional forum concert hall downtown Dallas. They do it every year. I think actually twice a year. They do one in the fall, one in the spring. It's always been a really good show. So I decided this year, after like a 4-year hiatus, I finally had to get back in the game, stop trying to be a hermit over here and actually leave the workshop and leave the store and actually go out on the road and see people and like take the Odin and Michael brand to them. So I did it. I won't do it again. I'll be honest. I'm not doing it. It was so much work. It was a lot of effort. And if I'm being quite honest, it just didn't pan out the way I hoped it to pan out. And that happens. I mean, if I'm being honest, not every show you go to is going to be just a rock star event. It's not always going to turn out the way you want. It was a little demotivating because it is a lot of work to pull things out of the store and take inventory and all this type of stuff. And at this very moment, I'm not feeling motivated to do it again. That'll change after I have a couple of whiskeys or something. I'll get back on the high horse and playing it out one more time.
And maybe that you get a couple of follow-up calls that you're like, all right, that's one of the things we've discussed in the past is sometimes it's not necessarily about the show itself. It's about getting the brand out there. But once you hit a certain point, and maybe it doesn't have the same return as if you're just getting your brand out there new. So you kind of have to do the cost-benefit analysis.
And that's exactly what I'm doing in my head. And I could be off. I do need to do the hard numbers. What it requires for me to get back from an event like that is definitely far larger than it used to be, given that I have to take my time, staff, and all this stuff that goes into it. At the end of the day, it's like, hey, would I have done better if I just stayed put in my shop, my store, and did an event here instead? In this case, for this event, probably, right? Now, sometimes I come back and I counteract that feeling with saying, well, was there any marketing value in it? And there certainly is. That's something I do think about. I don't have to make, quote unquote, a profit every time I leave the shop, right? Sometimes the profit's a long tail type thing. Does that profit come next week, next month, whatever? Am I getting my name out there? Am my brand being established? That's oftentimes more important than actually the money you make at that event, at least for me. In this event, I don't think we hit that. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm just crapping on the group. I don't think it was their fault. It was just a tough year. And I've heard from several other people that marketplaces this year have just been really, really tough on people. And that could be any combination of factors, to be honest with you.
I think it's an important point, though, to realize the things that don't work. Because I think we're always quick to justify and say, well, it had a marketing value or things like that. And yeah, to a degree, it does, but there's an opportunity cost with any of those things. And so I think it really is okay to look at a show and not in a rude way, just be able to say, you know what, I did it and I don't know that I'll do it again because you have a business to run. You have to make those choices.
Yeah.
I think sometimes figuring out the shows not to be at is just as important as, of an investment as figuring out the right shows to be at. But you kind of got to do both to figure it out.
I mean, there's a reason why I've not done any marketplaces in a while, and this may have just proved out that maybe this isn't the right thing for me to do for Odin Leather Goods, the brand. Also, it could be that the marketplaces I used to do that were so great back then, either the overall marketplace has changed, Odin Leather Goods and I myself have changed, and what I demand and what I need and require from these type of things is just different than it used to be, and so I need to be looking at a different type of marketplace, and I that is in mind too. Things like the Nutcracker Festival, the NFR event, there's these really big ones that honestly I'm not ready to go to. Maybe the lesson learned is I need to get myself ready to go, right? I need to be ready to spend the kind of money. I mean, some of these things you have got to spend a ton of money to go to, and you're going to be there for 3 weeks, which means you also have to invest a ton of money up front to build all that inventory over a number of months before the event. And I, to this point, have not been ready to do that. Maybe the lesson is I've got to figure that out and I've got to get ready next year. We'll see.
Yeah. Or at least to figure out how to evaluate that cost benefit analysis to see if it is worthwhile.
The last week there's been a lot of stuff like that, though. It's just I was in Pendleton a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
I know you weren't able to go, but I did go. That was an event hosted by Illume, Burns, Salary, entire collective of companies, which, by the way, is the more and more I interact with those folks, it's pretty impressive what they're doing. My last day in Pendleton, I'm kind of going in this backwards, my storytelling, but my last day in Pendleton, I got a chance to spend a bit of time with Braden Shaw. Braden Shaw is the leader behind Illume and Burns right now. It was his family business. He took ownership of it, I guess, a couple of years ago, and he has just been doing some fantastic things. But even more than that, his approach to business has, for me, listening to him, because I enjoy the business side of all this stuff, right? Is this really refreshing and it's very impressive. It is a new view on what we may have called these traditional craft-based businesses that we've had in the past. It's not a mom and pop. It's not, he's not in it just to sell a couple of saddles, a couple of hats. He's really trying to build something that has a legacy and has some legs to it. Like it or love it, I mean, or hate it, or however the saying goes. I mean, he is impressive, and what he's doing with his company is impressive.
That's awesome.
So I did his workshop. I also got a chance to spend time with Gordon Andrus, which was cool. I'd never met the gentleman. I've heard, story tales of him and his fantastic work, and he lives up to every bit of it. He is the most technical artist I think I've ever come in contact with in my life. There's a lot of feeling that goes into tooling and this Western style art, but he breaks it. He's taking that feeling, and he's taking these things that are habitual or things that have been habits, and just we do it this way because he's turned into a bit of a science. And he explains it as a science, and it's very, very technical. Honestly, it was too much to take in at one point, but it also filled in the blanks for some of these things I've been trying to figure, like, why do we do this, and what's the right ratio of this flower to that scroll, and this scroll to this thing and that thing. Well, he's already done all that work. He's figured it out, and if you're brave enough to dig into his book and have in a conversation with them, you may be able to understand some of those things yourself. I'm scratching the surface. There's a lot more conversations, a lot more studying needs to go into it. But it's the perfect merge between the art and the science of the art and the science of the art itself. It was cool.
That's awesome. I'll have to look that up. I didn't realize he had a book.
He has two of them, I believe. Some of the people in the class were like, "Hey, I bought this book 3 or 4 years ago, and I opened it up, I read it, I don't understand it, and so I put it down." But the third time I picked it up, it all just clicked. I was like, "Okay, that set the tone." It's set the tone that this is not a casual reading book. This is a read, digest, apply, read, digest, apply, back and forth over a period of time. And so I actually have been reading the book kind of page to page, and so far I'm getting it. But I know there's some technical pieces further on in the book that I'm going to struggle with, and I'll have to actually put into practice for a while before I actually understand the nuances of it.
You went to Joe Melling's event as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I did. That ran simultaneously. It ran in parallel with the Leathercraft show. So the name, the Northwestern Leathercraft Show, is that the proper name? something like that in Pendleton, Oregon.
The Pendleton Show is what I'm sure it has a technical name.
Yeah, it's one of those things. But yeah, so a couple things I realized, Joe and his wife did an event in parallel. Like, that's interesting. What I didn't quite realize is that they're literally next door to each other. So you have the Pendleton Convention Center that is attached to or directly next to Pendleton Roundup Arena, which I don't think I realized just how big of a deal the Pendleton Roundup is. That's a really big event. It's like the Super Bowl of rodeo event type stuff all there in Pendleton. It happens once a year, I think the first, second week in September. I plan on going back to that at some point. And then directly across the street from that arena is Joe and Marty's place, 23 plus leather. I mean, you couldn't find a better location for a leather shop. And it's a beautiful leather shop. Everything you see online, when you look at his videos, it's what you get there. They've done a great job of curating. I guess this is all his wife, curating the retail space. They have some clothing and some leather goods, things like that. It's a big building. It's far bigger than you realize when you watch the videos online. And in the back, there's like this wide open area. And so they had I think they call it Leather Life Convention.
Leather Life, yeah.
Because the Leather Life is their online community of followers and makers. I think they have like a paid community. They share patterns and some other things. I think you pay to be a part of it, but you get a bunch of like live video streams and whatever that goes along with it. And apparently that community is growing rapidly.
Oh yeah, they do a great job.
Very impressive. And there's a good reason why. I mean, people may know I'm always impressed when I see husband-wife teams working together so well, right? At least in the public eye. Who knows what goes on behind the scenes, but in the public eye, he and his wife seem to work together so well. They complement each other. She knows what she's doing. He knows what he's doing. And it seems perfect. So they put on the convention. There were some live demos going on during the day. There were some like mini classes because a lot of the classes at the leather show are long form. They're either half a day, which is like 4 or 5 hours, or they're all day. And they're bigger topics and bigger projects. I think Joe's workshops were a little smaller and more bite-sized. He had an online streaming version of the event. He does a really good job with his media as well. And then in the evenings, everyone was invited to come back to his place because, again, it's just a stone's throw from the convention center to do like these social events. There's like a coffee event in the morning, and one night they did a trivia and live Leathercraft showdown, where they throw out a challenge and two crafters are on stage battling it out. And there's like this tournament style. And I got a chance to be a judge in that, which was a lot of fun. I didn't realize I was going to be a judge, but when I got there, Joe asked if I would join in. I'm like, heck yeah, you need help. I'm ready to go. Matt Warner and Barry King battling it out, see who can tool this belt strap the fastest and all these different things. It was just fun. Lots of fun, lots of raffles. I don't think anyone left that event without some, trinket or some, token of appreciation in their hand, drinks and food. It was cool. All these events are based around community, and Pendleton was no different. There's a community of people out there. They're fun-loving. They're supportive. They like, interacting with each other. I will say there are far fewer people there that I knew. When we went to Sheridan, we were there together. I feel like I knew quite a few people there. Waco, of course, closer to home, lots of friendly faces and familiar faces, right? Because we've been seeing them so long. So it's just a great reminder that, there's a lot more people out there that we haven't met yet, and a lot of more communities and regions that we haven't really interacted with yet. We know Texas. We know, I think Sheridan and that group. Pacific Northwest, wide open, right? Don't know a lot of people there. And so it's cool to see some new faces, meet some new characters, I should say, shake some hands. And it was fun. I definitely would go back to it again, for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's on the bucket list for sure, but it always happens overlap with Halloween. But to your point, I know we're going to be teaching a few classes in Prescott, Arizona in February, and that one will be one that neither of us have ever been to either. So it'll be kind of an interesting one because I do think there'll be some overlap. I've seen some of the instructors and whatnot, but I'm actually signed up to take a handful of classes with just some people that I've never gotten a chance to interact with, but I'd follow online and see their work. So it is kind of interesting to see, though, that you have some of the people who are familiar faces, but there's just new communities at all of them. And absolutely, to your point, there's a ton of people who, as long as I've been working in the industry, a little over 10 years now, I still meet new people all the time, or people will, someone will pop up in my recommendations on Instagram, and I'll be like, I've never heard of this person, but they know all the people I know. There's such a community out there to congregate with, for sure.
Yeah, I'm seeing I'm starting to see there's these communities. Like there's also this Instagram community, there's a YouTube community, and there's also a TikTok community of characters as well. And they're not all, some of them there's overlap, but they're not all the same, right? So you may know somebody who's great over here, but didn't know this person over there. And then two big groups as well. We have Leathercraft Journal, we have a Loom, right? I know they work together at times and they work with each other and support each other in many ways, but they're also two different groups. They bring in two different audiences as well. And so I think we're really primed over the next year or two to really see a lot of cross pollination and a lot of new faces coming into things. I wonder if we're going to start seeing these leather events start to flow east a bit also, because right now there's kind of westernly. I don't think there's anything east of Texas at this point, right?
There had been the show that was in Pennsylvania, I think, but I don't know that it's still the same one that it used to be. I think it's kind of evolved a bit. Weaver used to be pretty involved. And there are the Leather Guild shows, which those move around. So different year to year, all the different guilds host. And so, but there's not anything consistent on the East Coast. And I don't know that it's because nobody's ever tried. I think historically it's been not as well attended. Now, I know that there's teachers who, when they'll do classes out there, those classes will fill up. So I'm not saying there's not an interest. I don't know if there's as much established community. Maybe it's just more spread out. I'm not sure, but I do know there has been interest in doing some shows in the eastern part of the United States, and it's been a struggle in the past. Maybe now's the time.
Maybe now's the time. No, I'm not saying you and I should do the shows, right? We should.
No, we'll go.
But someone will host it. We'll go and we'll participate. Yeah, sure. I do know you mentioned Weaver. Weaver does have some events they're doing. It's like a maker camp, and that's in the Catskills. Did I get that right? Catskills Mountains, Catskill Mountain Maker Camp. That I actually hope to attend.
Huh.
It's smaller and it's not attached to the groups that we are, we spend most of our time with, right? But I think it's very interesting. And it's expanded past just being Leathercraft. It's a bunch of other maker-related things, right? Because all these maker camps and maker events on the East Coast. But I think Weaver has been really involved in this one in the last 2 years. So maybe that'll pop up. But then also the ones that we typically go to have more of a Western saddle boot vibe to it. And obviously Leathercraft's Leathercraft, there's lots that comes out of it and you can do, but it is very rural Western-ish, okay? As you go further east, maybe that's just not the draw as much. And so maybe what we'll see, and I say maybe as a way to encourage it, we're going to start seeing more forms of Leathercraft being included. The sneaker makers, the artists, the armory people. I know some people in Atlanta that do beautiful, leather armory and all these other things. And while that's not my personal vibe, every time I watch someone do that, I'm blown away by what they put into it. And I typically learn something that I can apply to my own work as well. So I'm all for it. And one of our friends I didn't realize is in New York now also. So maybe he's going to be the draw. I didn't know that Brandon was in New York. Did you know that?
Yeah, I did. Swifthammer Leather, Swift, as most people know him, moved from LA to New York with their they have a little, really kind of established a community of people, and they got some land out there. The workshop is beautiful. It's amazing. But yeah, I would love to see some things evolve in new areas. And it's kind of interesting. I was having a conversation recently, slight detour for those who don't have this background, but I am in the process of establishing a couple new ventures, but one of them is a nonprofit, the Leather Arts Foundation. So there's a handful of people who are involved in that. We need to get some of them together sooner than later to get some more formal planning done. And I don't mind talking to people. I'll talk to people all day. And so I was meeting with the CEO of the Amon G. Carter Museum, which is a pretty big museum here in Fort Worth. And we were just discussing kind of the fate of museums and how that's changed a little bit over time and some of the funding around that. And it was interesting because this guy who is very well established in the art community, one of the very first questions that this gentleman asked me was, what is the role of the guilds in leatherwork? And there is a guild system. There's the International Federation of Leather Guilds, and there are guilds all over the United States, probably all over the world. And there is the Lone Star Leather Guild here, which we're very fortunate because it's pretty well established. But that is one of those things that some of the community in a local area may ebb and flow with the success of the guild, because it creates that microcosm of community, right? Maybe you can't go to a big show, but you can once a month meet up at the local Tandy or somebody's workshop or whatever and have a meeting of shared interests. And I do think that the guild has done some great work and continues to do great work. But again, each of the local chapters will succeed and thrive or falter by participation and leadership. And it is interesting to hear somebody who their life's work is investing in the preservation and growth of art. And their
Yeah.
first question was, what is the role of the guilds in the industry? Because that is such a fundamental piece of so many of the different communities. And so I do think what they do is important and can't be understated, but I also recognize where there's probably some of us out there that could give them a little bit more support than we do.
I'm wholeheartedly agreeing with you in many ways. And then I'm also struggling a little bit because I'll make some comments and I'll talk big crap, but it's not about, I don't want to be negative on the guilds. I would just say that not every guild is the same. Not every guild sees themselves in their role the same way. Some guilds are very hobbyist focused. And honestly, and my experience with them is that they're doing the same thing they've been doing the last 30, 40 years. And there's nothing to push for excellence. So in terms of art and the preservation of art, they're more hobbyist guilds, right? They're not really pushing for excellence and trying to do the best work possible or trying to find an environment to support anyone that's trying to do the best work possible. In fact, if you are a fantastic leather artisan, you probably don't fit in well with some of the guilds. And then you have other guilds that are all about that. They're all about excellence. They're all about trying new things. They're all about inclusivity. And other guilds that are not all about, no, 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 all we do is tooling and all we do is the tandy kits off the wall. There's no governing body, or there's no, and I'm not saying the governing body is what's needed either. I'm saying that, but there's nothing for them to tie back into as how do we grow together? How do we use and leverage each other's synergy to further, help the leathercraft community as a whole? It's just this guild does this by itself, and this guild does something else. It's it's a hodgepodge of people and attitudes, and in many ways, some of them are old fashioned. They don't want to move. Other ways, that same old fashioned attitude is also something we call preservation. It's a little bit of a combination of both. And I don't know what's right, what's wrong. I just see it as it could be very much so a benefit, or it could be a challenge.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And there is a governing body that is the International Federation of Leather Guilds. So all of them are part of this overarching organization. But to your point, they all operate very independently within that. And you're not going to have the same experience going from one guild to another, which has its pros and cons. But I do encourage anybody who's listening, just do a search if there is a leather guild in your community, because if nothing else, it may be an opportunity to connect with a few folks and they might need you, to be fair. So this is a craft that is enjoyable to be social and to learn with each other. And too many of us kind of, to your point earlier, get very comfortable being isolated. So whether it's the best one or not, I think there's some value in at least going and checking them out. And maybe they grow over time. Maybe that is one of the things that, as we look at the growth and expansion, whether it's the way they exist today or something parallel, that advocacy group as a whole is a pretty important part of anything. So I just thought that was an interesting comment, that was the first
Hmm.
place he went. What do the guilds look like?
Yeah, that is interesting. I wouldn't even know anyone would know there's guilds, outside of the space. So that is very interesting. In terms of community, I don't know if this happened through the guild, but I do think it's, I'll brag on you and I. I think one thing that you and I have picked up the torch on, and not because we own it by no means, but because I think we want to encourage it, is you have hobbyists, you have pro amateur folks, and you have professionals, right? I think you and I agree, whether we state it out loud, verbalized or not, that there is a need for this helping people move from the hobbyist level to the business level, right?
Hmm.
Helping people that have businesses. This was a conversation that came up a lot in Pendleton. These people that you have businesses, but your businesses are only solely based around the one individual. And if the individual leaves tomorrow, the business is done. And any training, any opportunity for that business to be handed down to someone, any opportunity for that business to have grown other professionals because they worked in the business for a period of time. I listened to some of the Burns stories about people that have been with Burns for so long. A lot of their leadership has, well, if not all of it, has grown from within. Their best silver maker, their best saddle shop guy, they started at the bottom of the rung in the business and have grown through the ranks, and now they are fantastic, beautiful artists, right, and business people. That's just one organization, though, right? Like, what role can Odin Leather Goods play in taking in growing more people who believe that leathercraft is a profession, a trade that is worth learning and taking on their own? If I only do it the way I guess a lot of folks are right now, where if I'm gone tomorrow, the business is gone too, well, then I really haven't. I feel like we could do more. And I think conversations like this about the business, about how to grow, about how to get over yourself in many ways, that's my thing, right? How to get past over and past yourself, that we have a lot, is all about finding a way to make these businesses sustainable and be something that can be passed on. And so, in talking about the guilds and the community, there's community also within the business conversations. And some of the best conversations I've had recently have come from this community. I mean, I got a chance to have dinner drinks again with Keith Seidel and Tim Hawk and people at Hamleys and all these other names that I'm some I've known for a while, some I've just learned. But those to me are more valuable than the swivel knife class. Although I enjoy the heck out of that. But it's the business conversation about how do we grow, how do we make this a sustainable thing that we can hand off to our kids or hand off to someone that's in our shop now because they have raced where they want to strike on their own. Are we going to help them strike on their own? Are we going to support them? Right? Answer, I think, for most people is yes, we're going to support them. We want to support them. We want to grow this as an industry and as a legitimate business that someone can invest their life into. So it's not just saddles and boots and swivel knives and which tannery do we want to buy our goods from, right? It's also the community of how do we support each other from a business perspective, and how do we learn from each other's mistakes? How do we learn from each other's wins? And that will be something else that could be added into the guild. And I think that will also come out of your endeavor as well, as we look at some of the businesses that are absolutely it's art and there's artistry in it, but they were actually businesses that turned a profit and businesses that were able to sustain, in some cases, not just one artist, but a family of artists, right? And people that work for that business long term. I'm here for all of it.
I just kind of scratched the surface on what the nonprofit will really do and what some of the goals are. And that's a conversation for a different time. I don't want to make this whole episode about that. But I will say part of the reason that I have pursued that specifically as a 501c3, as a nonprofit organization, is so that it has a board of directors. So it is a group of people. It's a group effort. It's not just what I think is good, what's needed. It's a community of people who are working towards this common goal. And it's not totally reliant on me. That's part of having a board, is you have different stakeholders and some of them rotate out. And I've had people ask, what if it grows and you lose control of that? I'm like, that is great. I can't wait. That sounds like the best problem to have, that, there was so much momentum built around an idea that it outgrew me. And in that case, I'm glad to kind of be in that support role and then see it where it needs to go. Because I do think that too many things in the industry are tied to individuals. And it's really easy to get to that place, particularly if you are an artist and you start up casually. But then I can't tell you how many times I've heard the story of, somebody who was so well established in their craft, in their industry, and just their kids didn't care. And their stuff went to a thrift store or a garage sale. And we're talking like pieces of history that probably just got thrown away because somebody really didn't have that plan of what to do with it. And so that's one of the things that I think is important, is having that plan, but then also having that plan not live with an individual, having it live with, kind of an organization that can carry that through regardless of who's involved at the time. So I'm sure talk more about it later, but
I hope we do. I've been privy to some side conversations, obviously, but I think people are going to be really excited about what's to come. And I know you're still working through a lot of things, but it represents a bit of a change. I don't want to say a change in, the guard by no means, but it's a new, fresh look on what's been going on. And I think it's very inclusive, and I think it's meaningful. So I'm excited about it.
I think I benefit in the fact that I'm a terrible leather worker. that I can go. I'm very welcomed in a lot of the communities, but I'm not competing with anybody. I know we've talked about nobody should compete with anybody, but I think that gives me a very unique position in the community that I can look at it more objectively and just kind of step back and say what's needed here.
Yeah. Yeah.
In my job, a lot of what I do is what's the problem we're trying to solve? What are the pain points of the people who are involved, and how do we create solutions around that? And that doesn't stop at work. So I think that's where a lot of this was kind of born out of, is seeing a need and kind of feeling that if I have the capacity and the right positioning to be able to do something about it and I don't, well, shame on me. it and maybe that's an undue amount of guilt, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of potential there, and I'm glad to steward the parts of it that people will allow me.
You definitely have a passion for the community. Your lack of passion for a specific part of the art, like the actual hands-on art, I think is actually really good. And I don't know if people understand why I say that, so I'll explain a little bit. But when our passion is so tied up in art, it clouds our judgment. Right? I won't make the best business decision for Odin Leather Goods because I'm so hell bent on I have to do it this way because I'm passionate about that one thing. I finish all my edges like this, and I'm never going to change. Right? Even if the world metrics, numbers, marketplace tells you that it doesn't matter, I won't change it. So I'm too tied to the passion of it, right? I think you have to be a little divorced from the craft a bit to really make some good decisions for the overall benefit of, in my case, my company and brand, and in your case, decisions that are going to benefit more people. It's going to be more inclusive of everyone because everyone may not see edge finishing the way you see it. I'm just using that as a random example, but swivel knife, edge finishing styles, whatever. Pick your poison. And I actually think that's a good thing. And like you said, because you're not in competition with anyone, it doesn't. I don't want to speak for you, but it doesn't matter if you tool like Jim or you tool like Rob or you tool like Keith or whoever. What matters is the craft. What matters is the people. All of us, all of them. Basically, I'm saying you should run for president at this point. Is what I'm saying. So I vote for you. You're everybody's guy, not just one guy or one corner's representative. And I think that's a good thing.
Well, I appreciate that. That's a strong endorsement. I think
Yeah.
I'll probably postpone my presidential run, but I'll see what I can't do for the leather industry on weekends.
Yeah.
So,
Another weekend job for you. Like you don't have enough already.
yeah, which actually that's one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight that I think is an interesting topic for people in general, and I'll even be candid. It's something that I can be challenged with as well, is just getting overwhelmed as I just talk about these grand plans, right? But this idea that there's all of these ideas and there's so much to do, and it's easy to get to a point where you almost like hit a brick wall. So that's one of the things that I struggle with. I know other people struggle with, particularly as we get into the holiday season and things really ramp up and get busier. It's easier the more there is to do. That doesn't mean that we always feel that motivation to
Yeah.
tackle all the projects. Sometimes it kind of catches up with us and the tidal wave comes over, and I struggle with that myself. I know we all do. And so, one of the things that I wanted to talk about a little bit tonight is, what are some of your tips that when you get overwhelmed and you're having a good day, so maybe it's a good day to ask you, but
Yeah.
when you get to that point where you're just feeling overwhelmed, it's easy to like stop. And sometimes you need to. Sometimes you need that break.
Well, I would say I'm in that camp, to be honest with you, that I'm the guy who should stop. I had at one point built a name for myself as a hustle, 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 work, 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 round the clock. And that was me, and it's still me many times. But I'm also one here to sit here and admit that may not be the right thing at times. Maybe stopping is better. Maybe resting is better. I've always thought there's two types of people in this world. There are people that when things get tough, they fight and they push forward, they work hard, they go harder. And other people that go take a nap and they go rest, they go sit still, and they go think. I used to think that the people that were napping were not using the best of their ability. They weren't really, getting after it. I now started to believe that some days when I'm fighting and I'm pushing and I'm staying up late and I'm 2 hours sleep a night or whatever, I have to ask myself, am I really getting any more done or am I just being active? I'm moving around, I'm working hard, I'm wearing myself out, but am I getting anything else done? Maybe if I would go sit down and take a nap, in theory or whatever, I could plan, I could refresh, I could figure out maybe what is priority, what isn't priority. Maybe I can figure out, what's an emotional response versus what's a factual response to things. I believe that could happen. I'm not very good at that right now, to be honest with you. Typically, when I get tired or when I'm in a corner, I fight, I push forward, and I work, 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 work. But I don't know if that's always the best thing. Sometimes maybe you should sit down and take a nap. Sometimes you should push harder. I don't know. All right. But I'm convinced that it has to be a combination, maybe a balance between those two options, not just one or the other.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a different scenario where if I hit a wall, sometimes I will just like shut down and I'll just need a break. And and whether or not I tell myself I need a break is different, but it may be that I get sick and that's what makes me stop. Or, there's something that I have to step away for a little bit for one reason or another. And the thing that always helps me kind of get back in my groove a little bit, and I will say it stresses my wife out. And this is not for everybody. I will sit down and just with a legal pad write down everything I can think of that I need to do. Now, it's not just today. Like it might be learn Spanish, right? Like something that's in my brain that I know I need to do, clean the garage, things like this. And I think I actually may have learned that from David Allen's Getting Things Done, but that's been a really useful thing for me when I kind of start to stutter and stall out a little bit is to just sit down with that legal pad, fill it with 4 or 5 pages of things to do, which could easily feel overwhelming. But to me, it kind of gives me control because now I know what it is, not just all living in my head. I think the analogy is that if you have a computer with too many tabs open, eventually it's going to crash. I think it happens to us too, that sometimes if you just sit down and write it all down, you don't have to remember it anymore. Right. And that gives you a little bit of a clean slate to assess what is it that needs to be tackled first. Yeah. I'm also a big nerd. I know this is a surprise to you, but I love brain chemistry. I think the way that our brains work is just fascinating. And not that I'm always good at this, but it is one of those things that you start to understand why your brain works the way it does. You can almost kind of make it like a mathematical equation to how to resolve some of these things. So, for those who are less familiar, you basically have 4 feel good chemicals in your brain and one major stress hormone called cortisol. Of the 4 feel good chemicals, you have endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. And so, when you get in a funk, quite frankly, which all of us do, your response is to run, it's to push, right? You're probably very endorphin driven in how you respond to that increased level of stress hormone, that increased level of cortisol. And it maybe also be the dopamine, which is kind of the reward chemical, right? And so getting something done, that's how you keep that motivation. Some people they need to go walk around in the sun, right? That's how your body generates serotonin. It's through exercise, through things like that. Or if you've ever been stressed out and you just need a long hug, like a 20-second hug. I know that sounds painfully long, but biologically, a 20-second hug can break you out of a funk because it's what it requires for your body to actually start producing oxytocin in response to another person. And so I can say that I can say all these things all day, right? That doesn't mean I always apply them, but there is a little bit of gamification that you can almost do when you kind of get into these patterns. When you say, I just need to go for a walk, or I need to go to the gym, or I just need to go cuddle my kid on the couch for a little bit. These are all actually biologically sound solutions to being able to get your motivation back because it lowers that stress hormone, which inhibits you from being able to produce all of these other feel good chemicals. So that's my nerdy detour about the brain and motivation. But I do think that there's some things that you can do very intentionally. I've heard of people refer to making a menu, right? That if you run into this frequently, my menu is 10 jumping jacks or whatever that is. It's just things to select that at any given time, that's going to burn 100 calories. And because you got a little bit of exercise and you burned 100 calories, now you feel like you've accomplished something and kind of start to get the ball rolling again. And so there's a lot of different really interesting tricks to that. Again, do I do them when I'm at that loss for motivation? Not always, but sometimes that is remembering them is what kind of gets me over that hump.
Do you not do them because you don't want to, or is it because you don't have a habit built up? And is it building good habits the thing that helps us pull out these tools and that you're talking about essentially? How will one find a way to move from I know them, I heard about them to actually I'm implementing them?
I think preparation and not just waiting until you need them, right? Like the idea of creating a menu that has 10 different things. I'm going to play guitar for 10 minutes, or I'm going to go for a walk around the neighborhood, or whatever those things are. Those kind of things remove the need for decision making. That in that time, it's easy to kind of get blocked, because sometimes that block comes from fear of making the wrong decision,
Right.
those kind of things. And so if you have just simple, easy wins, I find that a lot of time, at least for me, I'm not saying this is for everybody, but a lot of the time, if I prepare for that lack of motivation while I'm motivated, I'd overcome it easier. Now, that's a hard thing to do because I'm going to stop to prepare things for later while
Hmm.
I feel like I should be getting things done now, right? It's one of those things that I can't say that I always do it, but when I do, I find that I'm able to kind of get back in the swing of things quicker.
Mm. In my mind, I think it's connected, and hopefully it makes sense. But this is where what you said, decision making. Like I want to make fewer decisions, right? It's I don't
Hmm.
want to decide how do I want to handle the stress, or how do I, or for some people, this is not me by the way, but I don't want to have to decide, am I going to go work out today or not? I would love to say it's predefined because no, it's not whether I want to or not. It's already been defined that I do work out on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. No matter, my wife's like that. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's not about whether or not she was tired or not tired. Got up. There was no predefined checklist to decide whether or not she was going to go do it. No, it's Monday, 8 a.m. I'm going to work out. She's really, really good about that. I, on the other hand, not good about it. The only thing I've decided is I'm going to work. Which there's benefits to that also. Like I don't have to. You're never going to see me sit around saying, "Oh," and loathing. Oh, I got to go to work today. It's already been determined. I'm going to work. World comes to an end tomorrow. What are you doing, Odin? I'm going to work. Right now, maybe my decision making is off in that, and maybe it should be more like no, it'd be more like my wife who says, "No, I'm going to work out because it is beneficial to her for all those different reasons." I don't know. So if I could find habits that support the things you're talking about and then build a habit so that the decision's already made, so that when times do get tough, stress levels are high, whatever, I'm not going to allow that to take away from the things I already know are going to be. It plays together well in my head. I don't know exactly what you meant, but it makes sense in my head for some reason.
Yeah, I get what you're saying totally. And it's funny, my great aunt, she always used to say, if I die, don't bury me on a Monday because John won't come to my funeral because he'll be doing laundry.
There you go.
Because he's such a creature of habit. John
Yeah.
was her husband. And so there are those things. And I don't remember if I mentioned this in a previous episode or not. So I apologize if I did. But I was having a conversation with someone recently, and they said that the way that they started their habits were not even jumping into it, it was just doing a fundamental piece of it. So
Mm.
for him, he wanted to work out every morning. And that was part of what his goal was. But he didn't start by working out every morning. He started by getting up and just sitting in the garage on his phone. All right. And he did that for the first week. He just got in the habit
I can do
of
that.
being in the space.
Yeah.
And then the next week, he kind of like got up and was in the space and then stretched a little bit, and it may have taken him 6 to 8 weeks to really get to that point where he was working out in the morning, but it was all of these micro habits to build along the way. And I've run into that. And I'm like, I'm going to get up and work out this morning. And I do it once. And I'm like, man, I am awesome. And then never do it again. Yep. Check that box. 2025, worked out once. But I do think that was an interesting idea of creating smaller habits that then you can kind of build upon. I haven't been successful with it, but I do think about it. And maybe that's the first step.
Maybe that's the first step. That's the first step. That part of building a habit is thinking about and considering said thing we want to do. Okay, sure. We can rationalize the hell out of that one for sure. It makes
Yeah.
sense though. It makes sense. How do we handle these things? And I'm all about decreasing decision making that I have to do on the fly because that's where that transition, having them figure out if it's worth me doing or not going to do, or am I going to go home? Not going to. I mean, it's all these things. As you're talking, a flood of things are going through my head, and it makes a lot of sense.
Something we haven't done in a little while because we've had some awesome guests. We had Justin last time, a lot of fun. But something we just haven't done in our conversations in a bit is, what are you reading? What are you watching? What's inspiring you right now? What's something that you've learned from recently?
Yeah, so a few things that I've been really into recently is, well, reading wise, Gordon Andrus' book. I'm determined I'm going to read it page by page. I'm about halfway through it now. That I've committed to that, and so far it's working. So I'm on that. And then there's some YouTube channels I've been watching a lot, like One Mic History, which is this guy who tells African American history about businesses and brands that change societal norms and things like that. Like Sears, like I didn't understand the role Sears has played in African American history in this country. Things like that. The post office, all these weird obscure things that, and hopefully people, when I say African American history, people don't say, well, what does that have to do with me? Trust me, folks, it has to do with all of us, right? It's
Mhm.
U.S. history, it's American history. All of us are included in that. And I think if you take time to listen to those stories and take time to listen to history, you'd be amazed at how these nuanced things change the course of history. Sears, for instance, their catalog that we all know, the Sears robot catalog, at least I think people in our generation would know that. If you're younger, maybe not. But how we got this catalog, and at one point in time, the catalog sold cars, it sold houses, sold all these different things. That paired with the U.S. Postal Service allowed people in different rural communities to have access to things they never had access to before. It fundamentally made me think about how small things we do have bigger impacts. So great YouTube channel, One Mic History, Gordon Andrews' book. I'm starting to dig into some social media books as well. Social media continues to change. I have one book I've written by a buddy of mine named Tristan Sutton. He released a book on Amazon. Really good book. He's been a Facebook guy for a while. He understands Facebook in and out. He's like one of these Facebook certified gurus. And I'm starting to dig into his book as well, because even though that's something I've been working with for a long time, it has morphed and changed so much over the years that what I thought I knew may have changed by now. So I'm going back and refreshing my memory on a lot of those things. So those are my three resources this week that I'm digging into.
That's awesome.
Okay. What about you?
I think for mine, there is a book that I started actually reading. I purchased a physical copy of the book like years ago, and I've had it as like a bathroom reader and never really picked it up. And I know myself well enough that I finally got it on audiobook and I've been listening to it, and it's really refreshing. It's not a business book per se, but it is just kind of a fascinating way to frame your thinking. And it's called The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. Probably plenty of people listening who are like, oh, you've never gotten around to reading that book. Like, it's a pretty well-known book. I've seen it appear in movies in the background because it's just a gray book with a black circle on it. But Rick Rubin he has produced music for just the most diverse acts, everything from, yeah, Run DMC, but everything from hip hop to System of a Down. Like, and he's just this fascinating guy. And it's just his thoughts on creativity. And some of it's abstract, some of it's kind of a little out there, but it gives you lots of things to think about, right? It's not a book that I think I could just sit down and read cover to cover, because I'll get through a few pages and then just kind of need to stop and reflect on some of the things that I just read. So if I was going to start a book club, I would probably start a book club with that book, just because I think it would be some very interesting conversations ended up kind of coming out of it.
I've never read the book either, but I've heard great things about it, and I've heard video interviews of him talking about this creative process. He's been this awesome producer for years
Mm-hmm.
in many genres of music. The one that comes to mind, of course, is Run DMC, because I think that's where he started, and they have movies about all that type of stuff. But he himself is not a musician. He's not an artist. He's a creative, but he doesn't do music. It's the straight, and he explains it. At least I've seen these interviews that have explained it, and it's very interesting, very very interesting. Maybe I should give it a read for sure.
Am I the Rick Rubin of Leathercraft?
We may have just solved this. That is because Rick Rubin's impact on the music industry is obviously been massive, but he himself is not a musician.
Yeah.
There's
Well,
something there. There's something there.
I won't inflate myself that much. He's incredible, and
That's my job.
I
I
do
got you.
occasionally I do occasionally I do occasionally dabble with some leather work. The other thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately is, and this was like a meme or something I saw. It was not even anything terribly formal, but it was a Japanese proverb, or supposedly a Japanese proverb, right? And it said, if you get on the wrong train, get off at the nearest station. the longer it takes you to get off, the more expensive the return trip it will be.
I don't know if that's Japanese, but it sounds like good common sense to me, which common
Yeah.
sense isn't that common these days, but makes sense.
Yeah. And I know that sounds like such a simple concept, but there's so many times that I can think of in my own life, and something seemed like a good idea at the time, and I was too stubborn or I was being encouraged or whatever, and I kind of stuck it out longer than maybe was smart. I think there's sometimes that there is some wisdom in recognizing when it's time to move on from something, whatever that happens to be.
Mm.
And that's been something I've been reflecting on a little bit, is how many things in my life either do I continue to do or have I done without a plan or without intention, but because it was kind of the thing in front of me. And then I just continued to do it because that's what I did. And so it's as simple as it seems, as straightforward as it seems. It's really valuable framing thing for me, or at least it has been, to kind of say, of these various things that I have going on, many things, which are the ones that I'm choosing to do
Mhm.
versus which are the ones that I'm doing because I've just always done them. And is that a good enough reason anymore? And that's been really freeing to help wrap up some of those commitments and take ownership of other ones. And so, yeah, in case that's helpful to anybody, it's if you get on the wrong train, get off at the nearest station. The longer it takes you to get off, the more expensive the return trip will be.
I think that's a really good place to put a wrap on this one, this episode. That's an awesome quote, and I think there's lots. I certainly could step on and give a bunch of thoughts because it gave me a bunch of thoughts in my mind. But yeah, it's been a while since we chatted. I think it's a good chat. We've got some guests coming up, right? I think we're pretty excited
Yeah.
about. I don't think we reveal them all here, but I know you've got a list of folks. I've got a list of folks. We may do some one-on-one interviews as well in between, but we're going to keep it going. We promised that we were going to give this podcast some effort and some thoughts and planning, and we've done just that. A lot of planning comes from you, which I appreciate. I know we'll be wrapping up 2025 soon enough, but that's not the end of this. We've got a long way to go. We've got a lot of people to talk to, a lot of great conversations coming up, and hope everyone sticks with us.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Beyond the Workbench. You can reach us on social platforms at Beyond the Workbench on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Also check out beyondtheworkbench.com and listen to more episodes on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.